Okay.
Welcome to a very special episode of Jews in the World. I am so pleased to invite Rabbanit Dr. Devorah Schoenfeld to this podcast. I just finished a course with her on the history of biblical interpretation, my first course for a master's in Jewish studies at Spertus Institute, which is in Chicago. It was a remote course. She is located in Chicago, and she's an associate professor of theology, Loyola University in Chicago. And what I learned taking this, my first graduate course in this subject, is there are uh, resources online that I had no idea existed. And there were several of us who needed to have what I would call a tutorial in two of the main ones. And I have asked Rabbanit Schoenfeld if she would please come on the show and just give a tutorial to help other people be farther advanced than I was when I started. So take it away. We're going to do two, and she'll tell you about the first one that we're doing.
Thank you. It's great to see you. It's great to be here. I think this is my second time ever on a podcast. I'm really not used to this format, so I appreciate you're helping me through it. Phyllis, it was really great to have you in the course. I know it was a grueling experience, but I saw how much you learned, and I really appreciated how much you learned. And, like I keep saying, the good news is you will never have to take a first graduate class in Jewish studies ever again. So for people who might be new to graduate work in Jewish studies or even in religious studies, when you go to graduate school, what you're moving into, you're going from being a consumer of knowledge to being a producer of knowledge. You're working on coming up with ideas, figuring things out that people really haven't figured out before. To do that, you want to come up with a research question. You want to figure out what people have said about things that are similar to this research question. And then you want to investigate this research question. To investigate this research question, you're going to need primary sources and you're going to need secondary sources.
Let's explain what's primary, what's secondary in
I'm
your world.
about to do that. I'm about to do that. I'm about to do that. Okay. Primary sources are the thing that your question is about. So this course that Phyllis and I were in together, this is a course in the history of biblical interpretation. So in this course, primary sources were Bible commentators. So a research question might be questions like, what's the difference between this commentator and that commentator, and why are they different? The primary sources would then be the two commentators. Or a research question might be, how was this commentator affected by the philosophy of their time period? Then the primary sources would be that commentator and the philosophers of their time period. So the primary sources are the texts that you're studying. The secondary sources are scholars that have written about the things that you're studying. Now, what sometimes this will get glossed as, sometimes people will simplify this as primary sources are historical, secondary sources are modern. It doesn't quite work that way, especially when you're looking at history of biblical interpretation, because what if one of the commentators you're writing about is modern? So we had an example in this class of somebody who was writing about modern feminist Bible commentaries. So in that case, her primary sources were things written in the 20th century, modern feminist commentaries written in the 20th century. And her secondary sources were academic books and articles about feminism in the 20th century. So the primary source is the thing that you're studying. The secondary source is academic books and articles about the things that you're studying. So today, what I'm going to give you are two really basic resources. One that's a great place to start for finding primary sources, and another that's a really great place to start for finding secondary sources. The place that's a really good place to start for finding primary sources is a database called Safaria. The place that's a really good place for finding secondary sources is called RAMBY, and that's an index of articles written in the field of Jewish studies. All right, is this clear so far? Anything that you'd like me to explain before we go to the databases?
No, although afterwards I'm going to tell my story about when I asked you, after watching the 3-part series, The Great Eagle, about Maimonides on Kaiflix, and hearing all these scholars, could I quote from the documentaries? And you said that it wasn't, no, I had to find their original writings.
Right.
Which, because the documentaries did not, and there were lots of very interesting scholars, didn't repeat their name, it took me hours to go through and match up that this guy who I was really interested in what he said, who was he, by finding out who he was earlier. It's okay. I had pages of notes and I learned a lot. But I just wanted to say, for those of us who think that everything is online, no, we have to use online, but we also have to go to the real original sources. So then I found the books based on these people.
And again, to step back, the reason for this is because you're a producer of knowledge and not a consumer of knowledge. In things that are popular, scholars will normally give their conclusions and not their evidence. But you, as a graduate student, are a producer of knowledge and not a consumer of knowledge. So you don't actually care about the scholar's conclusion, or you might, you care about it, but you care about their evidence because you need to be able to argue with them. You need to be able to figure out if they're right or they're wrong. So their popular work isn't going to be helpful for you. You need their scholarly work so that you can actually look at all their evidence and figure out what you're going to do with it.
And before we start, also, I like what you just told me before we started the recording about, because it took me a long time to do footnotes. And actually, I'd like you also, before we start, or maybe at the end, to explain the difference between footnotes and endnotes, and the two different, Chicago and MLA. But I like very much what you said about, after you're done, you can go back and see, I'm using your words, who you were in conversation with.
Yes. Yes. All right.
Okay.
We'll do that later. Now we'll do Safaria.
Okay.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to do share screen and let me find Safaria.
Should we also say that it's free, but there's also, will you explain that there's a paid and what the paid one gives you more of?
So no, Safaria is actually completely free. You can donate.
Oh yeah, I donated.
I
Okay, that's right.
recommend donating because it's a really.
Oh, okay. Yes, I donated, but I thought you.
Are you seeing Safaria now?
Yep.
Okay.
I thought you explained the difference between when you could do a, well, you'll explain it, citation sheet that you had to be signed
You
in.
have to be logged in.
Oh, and I thought that
Yes.
meant.
You do not need to pay to make an account.
Oh, okay, this is the kind of stuff I wanted to share that I got
Yes.
confused.
Safaria is completely free. Donations are completely voluntary. Once you see how much you get out of it, you may want to donate, but it's completely voluntary. All right, so you can see in front of you Safaria. Now, there are many tutorials on Safaria. I'm going to show you some of the ways that I use it, but I'm just going to show you that if you click on help, there are many tutorials and there's lots of instructions. There's many things you can figure out how to do. And you also can get in touch with people there. They're very helpful. But okay, so you go to the Safaria webpage and there are many different things you can do with it. So let's say you know what text you want to look up. This is the most basic way you can use it as a way to not have to actually have like an entire library in your pocket at all times, every time you sit down to write everything. So let's say, oh, I need to check something in the Mishnah Torah. Great. You click on halacha, you click on Mishnah Torah. Oh, it's in the laws of repentance. It's the beginning of laws of repentance. Okay, here it is. You can have it in English or in Hebrew. Very convenient. There is a huge, huge collection of texts here in wide variety of genres.
I have one question. What if you didn't know, and it wasn't until this course that I have to admit I was really clear, that the Mishnah Torah would be under halacha? Is there another way? The search button, right? Could I just put Mishnah Torah right there in that search button?
So that seems not super effective.
Right, that's what I wanted. That's what we're
Yeah,
checking here, okay?
yeah.
So that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you don't know which your topic is, ask
So
someone where it might be.
the thing is, you usually can narrow it down. So if you didn't know that it was under halacha, so what would have been your next guess looking at this? You might have thought it was Jewish thought, but you probably knew that it wasn't Tanakh or
Right.
liturgy.
Right.
So probably you would have found it within a few clicks.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So, or let's say you're looking up Talmud, something in the Talmud, again, very easy to find. The translation here is the Steinsaltz translation. You can find by Daf. You can use this to learn Daf Yomi if you want to. You can use this to learn Parsha. Again, very wide variety of texts. They have a surprising collection of nice modern things. They have Dirshuni, which is a collection of modern Israeli women's midrash.
Oh,
They have some things by Rav Soloveitchik. They have Yeshayahu Leibowitz. So it's worth browsing just to see what kinds of things are here that you're interested in. So that's one way to use it, spend time getting to know it. Sometimes people will use this as their siddur. You can actually daven out of it. There's a davenable siddur.
well, that's good to know for people like if they're traveling.
Yeah, if you happen to find yourself in away from shul on Tisha B'Av Mincha, and you're like, what on earth? I don't have a siddur, and I don't remember that addition, right? You can find the things. If you need slichot, whatever it is. Yeah. So that's one way to use it. Is just browse text, use it as a library. Okay, but you can also use it to find sources. One way I like to use it for biblical interpretation is you go to a verse that you'd like to see interpretations about. All right, let's just start at the very beginning, Genesis 1, verse 1. You click on the verse and you go to related texts. So it sorts the related texts by commentaries. So look at all the commentaries on the first verse of the Tanakh. Lots
But they're not all in English, is that correct?
They're not all in English. The ones that are in English have a little en next to them.
Okay, I can see it if I squint.
Yeah. Or maybe you're interested in interpretations of the first verse of the Torah from the Second Temple period. Oh, look. Here's one in the Book of Jubilees. Maybe you're interested in how the first verse of the Torah appears in the liturgy. Yeah, all kinds of things. So I use this function a lot. Click on a verse, and then you can spend a lot of time finding interpretations of that verse. For history of biblical interpretation, this is extremely useful. For people who are going in the other direction, be useful in other ways. Like, you know how Maimonides famously did not quote sources in his Mishneh Torah? So,
Just learned that. Yes.
all right. So click here. Oh, look, all his Talmudic sources for the first paragraph of his Laws of Repentance. So,
But this is other people who've assumed these are the sources. Is that right?
so yes, these are other people finding Talmudic parallels to what he wrote here.
Interesting.
So you can use this to find interpretations of a passage, or you can use it to find sources of a passage, depending on which direction you want to go.
Okay.
You can also use it to find parallels to a passage. So let's say you are, in Midrash Rabbah, and you're curious, is there any other Midrash that has a parallel to this Midrash? Oh, look, seems like there is.
Interesting. Okay. This is really an amazing tool.
Yeah. All right. Other things you can do. So the search function, I will have to admit, I do not use a lot, but it exists. So you want to search by topic, you want to search by keyword. Say, health. Mental health. Great. We all need mental health. So you can find sources that other people tagged as being relevant to mental health. You can find source sheets that were tagged as being relevant to mental health.
Could you talk about source sheets, please?
Great. So source sheets actually was going to be a next thing I was going to go to. I
Okay.
tend not to use the search function very much, honestly. When I'm doing things by topic, I'll tend more to go to topics and to source sheets. So go to explore by topic. So here you can browse by theme, or you can go to all topics, A to Z. Let's say a lot of the time I'll do search if I'm interested in interpretations of biblical characters. I'll go search by biblical characters. So Gomer, daughter of Dibalim. So she's the wife of Hosea. Interesting character. So there's only one reference to her in the Bible. Really only one source sheet about her? Okay. But there's a bunch of source sheets on Hosea. Okay. All right. Let's see if I get more. Okay. A little more here. Yeah, that might be okay. Okay, so that actually was a place where search was more useful than topics. But yeah, a lot of the time I'll go, if I'm looking for a biblical character, I will go by I'll go by topic, biblical figures.
Oh, that's Interesting.
Yeah. Here, Dina. So you get biblical texts about Dina. Filter, I find it more useful actually to sort of do chronological rather than by relevance, because then you get the texts more or less in order.
And when they were written, is that what you mean,
Yeah,
in order?
yeah. So you
Okay.
get biblical texts first, then midrashic texts.
Okay, just checking
Yeah.
that I'm following.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then you get sheets. So these are all source sheets. So these are sources that other people collected about Dina.
So does this mean they wrote them or they just give the references? Can we look at an example so we
Oh yeah,
understand?
let's look at some.
Dina in the red tent.
Oh, sure. Okay, so what this is a collection of sources that Rabbi Miriam Spitzer put together that she thought was relevant for thinking about Dina. A lot of the time, these source sheets are someone puts them together for a class, or sometimes they'll be put together for other purposes.
But let me clarify. By logging in, then you use the tools that are here to pull these quotes into one sheet so that you don't have to type in everything. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct. So when you log in, you can make a source sheet. Would you like me to show you how to do that?
Yes, please.
Great.
This is where I
So
thought you had to pay it. I didn't understand you just
yeah,
said to log in.
okay. So let me go to my account. So here you can see my account.
Which is why I
Profile.
didn't make a source sheet, because I didn't understand.
Okay, so here you can see all the sheets that I made. A lot of them are not published. The reason they're not published is because they're source sheets that I made for my classes in particular, and I don't think they would be relevant really to people who aren't in my classes.
So not published means that it just only you can look at it, or people you've given the link to, is that right?
They're available to anyone who has the link, and they're not indexed.
Okay, just wanted
Yeah,
again to
there's
clarify.
some of them. This one I made public, How Many Lovers Are in the Song of Songs, but a lot of them are really intended just for my classes. So let me show you how to create a new sheet. So create a new sheet, and I'll call this sample sheet. Okay, so there's a few ways you can add a text. So one is you can just type in the text here. Okay, great. I just added the first of the Torah.
Great.
First of the Torah.
Okay.
Okay, great. And I just added Rashi's commentary on it. Great. So that's one thing you can do. Is you can add sources by typing them in. Okay, I'm now going to save the sheet. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is you can browse sources or find them any other way, find them through someone else's source sheet. Okay.
Can you click from someone else's source sheet, or you have to still go and search yourself?
No, you can click from someone else's source sheet any way that you get to a source. So, okay. Oh, this looks like a nice source. So here I like this source. Oh, look, I think I will add it to my sheet. Add it to my sheet. Here. Let me see who made a source sheet on Genesis 1:1.
771 sheets.
Okay, Josh Franklin, you seem like a nice guy. Okay. Okay, you have a nice source. I think I will add this.
Now, let's clarify. His would be considered a secondary source.
No. His source sheet is not an academic source.
Okay, let's make this clear because
Yes. Because he is not making academic arguments. He is just collecting sources. You know, some people will talk about tertiary sources.
okay, meaning third, right? So this would kind of be like watching the documentary that I watched.
Yeah. So if you like this language, a tertiary source is a source that helps you find primary sources and secondary sources.
Right, that's what the documentary did for me.
Yeah.
Okay,
So usually other people's source sheets, what they are is they're helping you find primary sources.
okay,
Yeah.
I think this is a very
Now,
important distinction
yeah.
that I wanted to understand.
Now, if you find someone else's source sheet to be very helpful, you still may want to give them credit in the footnotes. You may want to say like, oh, I'm very grateful to so-and-so for helping me find this source.
Okay. Like at the end of books when people thank people whose research has helped them.
Yes. All right. So, okay, so let me go back to so I'm going to go back to my profile sample sheet. Oh, look. See, I have the sources that I typed in, I have the source that I found, and I have from browsing, and I have the source that I added from someone else's source sheet. Okay, so now I'm going to format the sheet. I'm going to go to edit, and I'm actually going to make it look nice. So I'm going to box the sources.
Oh, cool.
I'm going to take out God's name so that people don't freak out and worry about putting it in a Geniza.
Yeah. I realized that I needed to be more careful when I was printing something out the other day, that I needed to do that.
And number sources so that when I'm talking in class, people actually know what source I'm referring to. All right. And I'm going to leave it bilingual if I'm assuming that this is for Spiritus. If it were for Loyola, I would make it English only because my students there don't read Hebrew. All right. And now I have a source sheet.
Excellent. And then you can choose whether to make it public, just like I do on YouTube, public or private.
Yes, if I want to make it public, so I click share.
Got it. This has been very, very helpful. Now, wait, one thing while we're still in the source sheet, as I've told you, it took me a while to get my footnotes clear. And I started putting them on a separate sheet so that if I changed, which I did in my most recent paper, paragraphs around for the logic, because then I didn't keep having to change the footnotes. I just had them all here at the end. I then put them in. I think there's an easy way of doing some citations on this site. Is that true? Or not? Am I confused? Am I asking the question right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, that's not something I know how to do.
Okay, that's fine. I think maybe I saw it somewhere else where I was and it said, click and you can get the citation all written for you. So it's probably at an individual article. I got all excited. And I mean, it wasn't the right one. Okay, so this doesn't particularly help with tracking one's primary citations. Because wait, we talked about what you do for Sefaria. Why don't we talk about that though? Because when I did Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed and used the real book, then I quoted the exact page, for the blah, blah, blah. Here, if we were doing Maimonides' quote, the parable of the palace, we would just put Palace of the Parable, and then you told me to use the whole Sefaria link, right? And that's what I saw from looking it up.
So, for serious academic work, you want to know what text you're using and what translation you're using.
Right.
Now,
I put that translation.
Yeah. So normally, for when it's on the level of like you're taking a master's course, you don't have to worry about this so much. When it gets to the level of like you're writing a doctoral dissertation, so the actual text that you're using matters. When I was writing on Rashi, I had to like go running around like looking at Rashi manuscripts because God help, like the different Rashi manuscripts are quite different from each other. And just because something appears in a version of Rashi, that doesn't necessarily mean that Rashi wrote it. So you want to know what text you're using. Knowing what translation you're using is always important. If you did not translate it yourself, now you can't just translate it yourself and then you don't have to cite anything. But if you're not translating yourself, you do have to cite the translation used.
Yes,
Okay.
and I did that. I was very
So
pleased.
fortunately, they tell you what citation they use. Look, M. Rosenbaum and A.M. Silverman, London, 1929 to 1934. So you can actually look up what edition this is so that you can cite it.
Excellent. Okay, that's what I wanted to point out to people.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can even click on about this text.
Oh, this is interesting. And I just want to point out to anyone who's paying really good attention, that source that says nli.org.il, it's the National Library of Israel, right? Right there under Pet.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. In case anyone wants to know what that is. Okay. So how are we doing with Sefaria?
All right. I mean, there's obviously more you can do with it, but I feel like this should be enough to get you started.
Yes, I think this is just been wonderful and really helpful.
All
And
right.
now, so this is, let's just repeat the difference between the two as we switch. I mean, the use of the two.
So primary sources are the things that you're studying. Secondary sources are works written by scholars like you about the things that you're studying. As a graduate student, you are a secondary source. You are doing the same thing as the secondary sources. I mean, you're kind of a little baby secondary source, but
Certainly.
again, that's why you need their scholarly work and not their popular work, because you need to get into what they're doing. You need to be able to follow their tracks. You need to be able to undo it. The secondary sources are your conversation partners. They're there for you to agree with, to disagree with, to nuance, to say, you know, you're right about this, but let me add to you a little bit. Do not ever get into a debate with a primary source. It will just give you a headache. This is like the number one mistake that I see graduate students make, is get into a debate with a primary source.
So can you give us an example just so people can, what would be a debate? I'm trying, from Rashi. Rashi is your special expertise. What might someone get into debate with Rashi about? Besides growing wine.
So if the research question is something like, why did Rashi explain this verse in such and such a way? And their answer is because he's wrong and he shouldn't have explained the verse that way. Right? That's not an answer, that's a judgment. Right? And then you're not explaining Rashi. The answer doesn't match the question.
Okay.
Right? And the thing is, the reason that's confusing is because they're getting confused about the difference between a primary source and a secondary source. Because when you say Rashi's wrong, it's like you think the Bible is the primary source and Rashi is a secondary source.
Oh, I
right?
see.
And you think the real question is, what's the correct interpretation of the verse? But if that's the question, then ask that question.
Okay. I think I'm going to
So,
have to listen to this again, but I think I'm beginning to
yeah.
understand.
So,
Okay.
so it's not that it's wrong to argue with Rashi. It's not that you can never disagree with Rashi. It's that the question and answer need to match.
Okay, so the paper that I did about what did Maimonides really mean about the creation of the world, and I drew on secondary sources. I didn't say Maimonides was wrong in his interpretation.
Right.
I looked at secondary sources stating what did he mean, and there are differences of opinion.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a good example. Again, for those of us new to this graduate level of Jewish studies, we really need to understand so we don't get ourselves in hot water unnecessarily.
Yes.
Okay. So if we're done with Sefaria for now, we're switching to, your screen is going to switch to Rambi.
Yes. All right. So I'll do stop share, and then I'll do share again with Rambi. All right. So you can see Rambi now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And this comes from the National Library of Israel, as you told me.
Yes.
And is this all free too? Is that correct?
Yes.
And does it take donations?
No.
Okay.
So
Understood.
it's all free. It's all free to do the search. Getting the articles, unfortunately, is not free.
Yes, that
But
I
if you're a
discovered.
graduate student, okay, we'll get to this. If you're a graduate student, you should have a way to get the articles. Okay. All right. So let's search anything. Ibn Ezra. Let's do a search. Great. Very simple. Lots of articles come up on Ibn Ezra. Now,
Why does it say, can I just ask a question? It says sign in to get complete results and to request items. I understand the second half, but you mean this is not, if we didn't sign in, we wouldn't get all the result?
so I don't know. I've never signed in.
Okay, well, that's important to tell people. I know these sound like maybe small questions, but the kind of questions I get hung up on.
Okay. So if you, so if you do a normal search, if you do a search in English letters, you get anything that is written in English letters. So you get things that are in English, you get things that are in Spanish, you get things that are in French. You don't get things that are in Hebrew or Arabic or Chinese or anything written in non-Roman language.
Where was that you asked? Did I miss that where you clicked?
So I just did a search on Ibn Ezra, and now I'm going to click on this
Right.
on Ibn Ezra. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And I'm going to subject search Ibn Ezra. Why is it doing this? I don't know why it's doing this.
Okay. So we try
Okay.
a different, because it's a computer and they have.
Um, okay. So, when you click on this article, so this looks like a good article, Ibn Ezra on Song of Songs. So it doesn't tell you how to get it. This is an article that's in a book. So to log into what you would get by logging in is if you were actually in Israel and you could log in. Actually, it's not true that I never logged in. When I was a grad student in Israel, I logged in. And then you can request through the library that you're affiliated with in Israel. But obviously, you can't do that. So what you need to do then is you need to go to your own library that you're affiliated with and fill out a request for this article, and then they'll get it for you.
And how can I tell if the article is also in English? Looks like it's only in Spanish.
So the title is in English, Abraham Ibn Ezra on Canticles.
Okay, so that's a good hint.
Yes. The volume is in the volume title, it's a bilingual volume, but the article title is in English.
I see. And you see that little thing, the citation? Is that what I was thinking of?
Yes. Yeah, this will
Where
get you the citation.
And will
Okay.
it let me choose between the two different kinds? It's okay, but
Yes.
that's interesting.
Yes. Now this says online access, but don't get too excited yet because you click on online access. Okay, full text is available, full text. And okay, you hit, I'm not going to answer these questions. And it actually gets you a full text. Okay, that's actually kind of unusual. A lot of the time, even when you get a link to a full text, you hit a paywall. And again, when that happens, you need to go through your own university. Now, this is bad. I don't like it. Nobody likes it. People who write these articles are not paid for them. And then they're paywalled. So it's an annoying system that people write articles for free that then other people have to pay to get access to. But there you have it.
That is really weird. So I understood that through Spiritus, I could get certain things and that even books could be found for me. But in a couple of cases, I just bought the books on Amazon because I was just, I went in for my library, but B, it just was easier to go to Amazon. I'm just not doing a plug for Amazon. I'm just saying sometimes the book's available.
Yeah. Thing is, I do not recommend paying for academic books or for academic articles. They get very expensive. And if you are a graduate student, then part of what you are paying for with your very expensive graduate tuition is access to all of these academic resources.
Yes, it was a question of time. I wanted to get the paper in by a certain time, and I
Yeah.
didn't trust how long, because I'm in LA and Chicago would have to send the book to me. And I thought, okay, I need this book. That's after I did all the work watching the documentaries. I chose the one book I thought was the most important, besides my other resources. And again, it had to be in English.
Yes. All right.
So
if you read Hebrew, I recommend doing the search again in Hebrew. And then you get the articles written in Hebrew.
okay.
What else can I tell you?
So really, in terms of Sefaria does give you secondary sources, though, connected to the primary sources, right? I want to make sure I understand.
Sefaria really doesn't do modern, really doesn't do secondary secondary sources. That's not what it's for. It does primary sources.
Right, but if I want, but wouldn't we look at the commentary on first sentence of Genesis? Then that was a secondary source within Sefaria, right? Or did I not understand it? You see what I'm saying? That's a commentator.
So I guess if your question is what's the meaning of the first verse of Genesis, then the commentaries are your secondary source. But the truth is that's not how secondary sources are normally used. Normally people use secondary sources to refer to academic scholarship.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me say this. So to make sure if I can understand it, other people can.
Yeah.
So if I was looking at a medieval commentator about something Maimonides wrote, that would fall more into Sefaria. But if I wanted to look now at a commentator on the medieval commentators' comments about Maimonides, sentence, whatever, that would be a secondary source. Did I say this correctly?
Yeah, you probably want to distinguish between commentary and scholarship, even though like the two words mean very similar things.
Would you do that, please, for me?
Yeah, so if scholarship when you're talking about modern academic things, and commentary when you're talking about more classical things.
Got it. Okay, I think that's a very important thing.
Yeah,
So what you do on Rashi is scholarship
yes.
when you write.
What academics do for a living is scholarship. What
Got
rabbis
it.
do for a living is commentary.
And even though you're both, in this case, you work in the field of scholarship.
Yes.
Okay, I don't mean to give you a hard time. I just want people to understand so that they don't get confused, because this is such amazing, well, this is such an amazing tutorial and the research, but people get discouraged and if they don't understand, so I want to make sure they understand. So as we come to the end of this really excellent tutorial, are there advice that you want to give us? I know you gave me some very simple, well, appears simple advice that I wouldn't mind you repeating, which is that at a graduate level, you told me two things about repeating what a quote says, explaining it, and about making sure that you have the question
Yes.
in the beginning. Would you like to say that in scholarly words as opposed to my lame person's words?
So I think you said that very clearly, that it's about finding answers to that it's about finding answers to questions. I mean, I said it as producing knowledge, but the way you said it is also very clear. I guess one thing I would add, since we're looking at secondary sources, people often ask is, so how much scholarship do I have to read? How many secondary articles do I have to read? And the answer is really all of it. Because in order to produce new knowledge, you have to know everything that's already been said about the topic. Now, it's not really all of it, because if you read the most up-to-date scholarship, in theory, it should cite everything that came before. So if you read a whole bunch of recent stuff, that should more or less do the trick. But you read until you start like feeling like you're seeing all the same things cited over and over. You read until you get a sense of what the different things are that are being said about the question. And if that feels unmanageable, then your question is too big.
I thought that was one very important piece of advice you gave us, to keep the question narrow. And as I did research, I was able to understand, to narrow the question and still have something interesting, but to make it much more, and to put those parameters. She hasn't graded my paper yet, so I maybe didn't do such a good job, but the point is, in the first
Don't worry about
paragraph, to narrow what the question is, to make it clear that I was only talking about one of Maimonides' works, and then one topic, I guess, within his Guide for the Perplexed, instead of just all his writing. And I thought that was very helpful.
Knowledge gets produced one baby step at a time.
So,
sorry, you were going to add.
No, I'm just saying, why don't we close the screen and just have a few, if you would finish sharing your screen. Okay, so because I needed to get access to something. Is there anything else that you would like to say to encourage people to start on this journey?
I want to actually share something that I learned from the person with whom I took my first graduate class in Jewish studies. It was Naomi Janowitz, who teaches at UC Davis. And I asked her once, so what happens if I write something and it's published and it's completely wrong, and someone proves that it's completely wrong and it's just totally demolished? And she says, then you will have advanced scholarship.
That's really interesting.
And, that really sticks with me, because scholarship is a collaborative process. It moves one step at a time. It's not about like me individually being right or knowing everything or having all the answers. It's just about taking the next step.
That's really lovely. And this, I think we've taken enough of your time, so people can look up online, which I did, samples of, you have to ask your professor whether that professor wants endnotes or footnotes, in Chicago or MLA, and I just did whatever Robinette Schoenfeld said was her preference, and then followed the examples online, and then refollowed them after I got a better understanding of where to put them in the paragraphs. That was another learning experience. As a journalist, my temptation was to immediately put the footnote right after the time when I cite the book. Then I realized, no, you put the footnote after you've cited the quotation or paraphrased it. Did I say that right? So,
Yes.
okay. So that was a learning thing for me that a tip that I will share. And then the other thing is, I think I said earlier, I just created a footnote, a separate document. So if I messed up the footnotes, which happened, the computer didn't like me, and it started messing up the numbers, then I hadn't lost them. I had all the footnotes, and I could then go back when I finally decided to let go of my paper, meaning literally after changing the paragraphs around and around to make sure that I was trying to be as logical as possible, then I could just go back and put the footnotes in. So that's just my tip about not spending hours fighting with your computer over whether the footnotes are in the right place. Hopefully mine were. Anyway, Robinette Schoenfeld, I can't thank you enough, because I hope that students will share this with other students and really make their journey forward, because as we've seen in world events, we need more Jewishly educated people than ever before now. So I thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much. Great to work with you.